Streeterville, and Navy Pier. That bridge is from 1908, Carroll Street Railroad Bridge. When built in 1908, it was the longest and heaviest Chicago-style bridge in the world. A Chicago-style bridge is a bridge with a hunk of concrete on the back that is equal in weight to its bridge leaf. The bridge would come down right here on the right-hand side and meet the bridge footing to the right. This is where the industrial train bridge would cross, starting in 1908. To our left is a big gap through that building. So you'll see a big gap through that building. That's the gap the train would take. The train line is from 1908. All of the buildings to the left came later. So these buildings to the left had a wrap around that live active train line. That train line runs right through the merchandise mart as well and would run out all the way to Navy Pier in its heyday. But like I said, there's no longer any industrial users anymore. They stuck that bridge up in the late 90s because nobody wanted to use it ever again, and that's where it remains. Still works fine, could come down right now, just nobody wants to use it for industrial train service. See this curvy blue building to the right? 2011 River Point. This curvy blue building to the right pairs really nicely with this curvy green building to the left to function like the twin curvy gatekeepers of the South Branch of the Chicago River, which we are now about to go down. The newer blue building to the right uses the exact same radius of curve of the older 1980s green building to the left to make that connection direct. And to our left is a great view of over 100 years of Chicago architecture and history, as well as the Chicago Marathon. Feel free to take that photo on our left-hand side. That's 1914 to 2020, the ages of the buildings right here.
That building over there with the circle, there's the pancakes.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's what they look like.
They were probably being sold when you said that.
See this Y-shaped building here on the right-hand side? And by the way, I think you can go in there today. A lot of these buildings you can go in today. See this Y-shaped, you can go in, I think you can go in here today as well. See this Y-shaped building? Why does this building look like a Y? Well, the building is hemmed in from the back by a live active train line. It's all old train land. The building is hemmed in from the front by a 30-foot city required setback rule. You have to have your building 30 feet away from the river's edge to create the setback. 8th floor becomes the first floor. The base of this building only 39 feet wide. A 39 feet wide skyscraper. And to our top right is a great view of a bunch of fun people having a great time on a beautiful Sunday morning. Feel free to take a photo and wave yourself up there to the top right. I love that curvy, surreal walkway below it and the train on the back to the top right. How do you make a 39-foot wide skyscraper? Well, this building has 160,000 gallons of water at the very top that function like water in a bucket. If a bucket with water goes one way, water will slosh in the opposite direction. If I head to the building goes that way, the water will slosh in the opposite direction and help reduce sway. So that's 160,000 gallons of water across 12 concrete tanks that functions like water in a bucket. We'll see a building later on with 400,000 gallons of water at the very top across 6 tanks that does the same thing. You can definitely go in here today, Bank of America Tower, 1929, Art Deco. Sorry, this is the 1990s, sorry. The next one over is Art Deco. Bank of America Tower. See these giant tripod I-beams? This building is subject to the same 30-foot setback rule we've talked about before. You have to have your building 30 feet away from the river's edge to create the River Walk here in Chicago. Mayor Daley #2 went to San Antonio, Texas, and was inspired by the San Antonio Riverwalk to lobby for this Riverwalk here in Chicago. Ever since 1998, you have to have your building 30 feet away from the river's edge to create that Riverwalk right there. We'll now come into the architectural time machine. We'll see 5 buildings built in chronological order, starting with this building here on the left-hand side. Civic Opera Building, 1929, Art Deco. The building has 3 elements of Art Deco we've seen before: soaring vertical lights, deep inset windows, and see this big throne shape? That's the setback toward the top, the throne shape. See where it says Civic Opera, the building here on the left-hand side? That's the Opera House, or at least the back of the Opera House. The big idea of this structure was that the office space to the left, office space to the right, and office space to the top would pay for the opera in the center. Pretty reasonable idea, right? Self-supporting opera. Nothing could possibly ever go wrong with that idea unless you open up 6 days after the stock market crash of 1929, which they did. The founder of the opera is revealed to be a major financial fraudster by the stock market crash. He flees to France to avoid prosecution and dies penniless in the Paris subway. The Civic Opera building was run into bankruptcy upon completion of construction, but fortunately, the Lyric Opera is there today. The Lyric Opera is very successful. They have the largest stage in downtown Chicago. The Art Deco era, the Roaring Twenties, end with the stock market crash of 1929, which was followed by the Great Depression, which was followed by World War II. So there's not a lot of office buildings built between 1929 and this era here on the right-hand side. Gateway 1, Gateway 2. This is what office buildings looked like in the 1960s after a 30-year pause in commercial office building construction. This is what office buildings looked like in the 60s. And in the 60s, these black boxes were clad in this black steel and glass you see right there. This style is called modernism. Modernism is popular in the US in the 1960s, but was already popular in Western Europe, starting in the 1920s. During World War II, all of the leading European modernist architects come to the US from Europe and influence architecture here in the post-World War II era. The most famous modernist architect is the German-born Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who moved here to Chicago. We'll see Mies van der Rohe's last and largest building later on in our tour. Let's go from the 60s to the 70s now. See this white boxy structure to the right? Gateway 3, this is what office buildings look like in the 70s. In the 70s, modernist architects got bored with that boring black box style. So in the 70s, they went crazy. They went wild. And instead of building black boxes, they started building white boxes and beige boxes, brown boxes and yellow boxes, red boxes too. Keep it up. So that white box is what an office building looks like in the 70s. Let's get to the end of our time machine on the right. See this curvy green building? Gateway 4, that's the end of our time machine. Gateway 4 is surreal, curvy, dreamlike, and shiny. This style is an example of postmodernism. Postmodernism is a rejection of that boring black box of the 1960s. Postmodern buildings look like this. They're surreal, dreamlike, curvy, and shiny. The mantra of postmodernism is that less is more. And we'll see more postmodern buildings later on. We've already seen a postmodern building already. That Greek Temple office building was postmodern. Here we see the River Cottages was also postmodern. See this red Lego piece to our top left? That red Lego piece is us. This is an $800,000 You Are Here sign. We started our tour on the top left, on the top right rather, on the main branch, went up the top left of the north branch, and now we're on the south branch, where that red Lego piece is. So if you ever get lost along the Chicago River on a kayak or a canoe, or if you're just taking a swim, just swim right over here and go home right after that. I don't know if we have any Batman fans aboard this vessel. I'm a Batman fan myself. Have you seen The Dark Knight 2008 film? What happens in the opening scene? The Joker and his goons zip line onto the top of Gotham Bank. The real Gotham Bank is in our front right. The Joker and his goons zip line from the green building onto the top of Gotham Bank. The Joker exits Gotham Bank without his goons, going the wrong way down Van Buren Street in a yellow school bus. So watch that opening scene of The Dark Knight on YouTube after our tour. It will look so much cooler now that you have seen where it was filmed. The building on the right, in the real world, is the Old Main Post Office, built in the 1930s, when Chicago was the catalog capital of the world. All the catalogers were right here in Chicago in the 1930s. Montgomery Ward, Marshall Fields, Sears Roebuck. They needed this structure, the largest post office on planet Earth at the time of construction, to help them manage all that mail. Remember, in the 30s, you could order a single-family home via catalog and put it together yourself. So they needed a lot of space. But these days, it's way too big to be a post office. So it's been converted to a commercial office building. You can work there. That is the largest interior construction project of all time. It took $1 billion to convert that from a post office into an office building around 10 years ago. Just very successful, too. Just achieved 95% occupancy last year. So the very rare case of a successful office building here in Chicago. The other ones are having some problems. When we come off one of this last bridge, We'll have a little break for the buildings right here, as you can see. And you know what? Now would be a good time for me to tell Chicago's foundational story, which is best told in 3 very quick acts. The first act of Chicago's story starts about 7 blocks away to our back left, on top of a building that is no longer there, the old courthouse, at around 9:20 at night. On Sunday, October 8, 1871, a fire spotter that Friday night, posted around 9:20 on top of the old courthouse, sees a fire break out about 5 blocks away to our front right, and the fire spotter sends the fire department. At 9:30 at night, the fire department arrive here to the right, but find that the fire has already spread to many homes, sheds, and barns. Due to high winds, fire tornadoes form here to the right, and the fire tornadoes hurl flaming pieces of wood, 5, 10, 15 feet long, several blocks behind the line of firemen fighting the fire right about here to our direct right. At midnight, one of the fire tornadoes hurls a flaming piece of wood through the air across the river to our left into a tank of tar, which ignites, bringing the fire to the downtown area, destroying the entire downtown.
Oh.
That was at midnight. But fortunately, the main branch of the Chicago River serves as a fire break until 2:30 a.m. when a fire tornado hurls a 15-foot long flaming piece of wood through the air across the main branch of the Chicago River, and that flaming piece of wood smashes into a kerosene train across the river. The train explodes, bringing the fire to the north side, destroying the entire north side. A fire a mile wide and 100 feet tall destroys the whole north side of the city, destroys the downtown area to our left, and to the right where the fire breaks out in O'Leary's barn at 9:20 at night, you're pretty well off. The winds were going to our back left, 40 miles per hour, so there's not much destruction here to our right, even though that's where the fire starts. All the destructions between here and the lakefront to our back left. O'Leary's home survives the Great Chicago Fire, even though it's her barn where the fire breaks out. The house was on the right side of the wind. The Great Chicago Fire is the worst urban fire in global urban history. Sorry, Rome. Sorry, London. There's only one great thing about the Great Chicago Fire. It creates a blank canvas on which Chicago will be built for a second time, just when other things are happening in the realm of engineering. The next and quicker act of Chicago's foundational story is called the elevator. Prior to the invention of modern elevators, buildings were only 6 stories tall, because 6 stories was about as high as anyone wanted to climb. In 1854, Elisha Graves Otis stands in front of a large crowd on a high platform. The platform is only suspended by ropes. Elisha has his assistant cut the ropes, the platform falls, the crowd gasps, but to the audience's surprise, the platform only drops a few inches. Elisha had just demonstrated the modern elevator safety system. Prior to Elisha's invention, elevators were very dangerous. People were scared to use them. So Elisha's invention makes elevator travel safe and gives people the confidence to go up and down tall office buildings. Elisha invented that system right here in Chicago at the Chicago-based Otis Elevator Company. The Otis Company is still the largest elevator company in the world today. If you look down in any elevator anywhere in the world, you usually will see Otis at the floor. But there's one piece of the puzzle still missing to get us to the first tall office building. The last act of Chicago's foundational story is called the first skyscraper. William LeBaron Jenney is an architect, active in Chicago in the 1880s. Jenney comes home one day to see that his wife has placed a heavy book on their metal birdcage. Jenney studies how the thin wire of the birdcage supports the heavy weight of the book. And Jenney is struck with inspiration to design the first skyscraper in world history. All the early tall office buildings in Chicago and New York in the 1880s, they were all 10 stories tall, made of steel. The problem with brick buildings is you need a very wide base to support all that weight. Think of a pyramid or something like that. The taller the brick building, the wider the base required, capping the potential height. Jenney figures out that you don't need brick to build a building. You can instead use structural steel. And because steel is stronger and lighter than brick, you don't need that wide base anymore, making the height potentially unlimited of an office building. In 1885, Jenney built the first skyscraper in world history in downtown Chicago. That building is 10 stories tall, made of steel, no longer there. There is a building that's still there from 1888 by the same architect, William LeBaron Jenney. The first 16-story building of any type, 1888, also made of steel. That's the Manhattan Building. We can't see it from right here, but you can see the Manhattan Building after our tour in the South Loop. The Manhattan Building